But by afternoon, I knew exactly what my next move was. I went back to my room and checked around to see if anything was missing. Nothing seemed to be, so I set my watch and took a nap. The alarm went off at 9 o'clock. The alarm went off at 9 o'clock. I went to the bathroom to splash some water on my face and then I geared up for my expedition. When I got to the church, it was empty. I made a beeline for the left door on the creaky staircase. With flashlights attached to a headband in my waistband, I was good to go to keep my hands free for whatever I might need them for. I attached a safety rope like mountain climbers do and found a sturdy spot to anchor it into the wall. If the stairs gave out at me, at least I wouldn't fall. As advertised, every stair creaked like it was about to give out, but thankfully none of them did. The trip down was an assault on my senses. The damp, musty smell of rotting wood and general decay was nearly overwhelming. I was surprised at the general lack of cobwebs. It told me this area wasn't quite as off limits as some had let on. Surprisingly, the bottom didn't open up into a full basement. There were a few wooden shelves at the base of the stairs, but they were empty. Instead, it became a narrow passageway. The floor was made of dirt and the walls were the same stone the foundation of the church was made from. It seemed whoever had built this tunnel built it at the same time as the church. The ceiling barely made it to 6 feet. I had to duck to keep from brushing my head against it.
Thank you for letting me know.
I wasn't sure what I expected to find, but this was the key of discovering what was happening here. I had been walking for 10 minutes, senses alert, hand on my holstered sidearm, and suddenly the air changed. The smell became more pungent and the air warmer. There was a feeling of closing in that made the hairs on my arms stand up. I turned a corner and then the tunnel opened up into a large room with a high ceiling. I panned around trying to get the scope of the room when my light fell on something big in the corner. It looked like a massive black boulder that was made of leather. Watching transfixed, I noticed that it was moving. Not much, but just a bit of rising and falling. I realized it was breathing. Fear gripped me. I no longer had any interest in finding out what was going on here. I just wanted to turn and slowly back away. The thing made a noise. It was either a snort or a cough, but in either case, it seemed to be waking up. I doused my lights and stayed as still as possible while listening in the total darkness. Its breathing became louder and less steady. I heard a creaking that sounded like bones when somebody stretched. It was getting up, and I was standing in the middle of the tunnel. If by some miracle it didn't already know I was here, as soon as it walked over here, it would run right into me. My mind raced to come up with options as I heard footsteps coming closer. I backed up against the wall and started edging to the left, hoping that I was in the main room and not still in the tunnel. The footsteps were so close when they suddenly stopped. The absence of sound was deafening. I tried to hold my breath as I listened for its breathing. It was slow and sporadic, as if it was listening for me. Neither of us moved. We barely breathed, each waiting for the other to reveal the location. In my voice, I can take your place and travel around pretending to solve problems. While I was changing, I glanced around to see if there was anything else in the room that I could use. In the far corner, I saw what looked like a nest and an inverted cross hanging on the wall. If you could, why haven't you? I said, playing a hunch. What? If you were free to go anywhere, then why haven't you? You sit here in the middle of the woods with nothing to do. I choose to stay here. He said in my voice, "You choose because this is where your power is." Oh, you know so little. I'm rebuilding this place so my worshippers can live here and pray to me, giving me all the power that I need. Just like when this place was first built. And until my followers thrive, I survive off of human sacrifice. So you did kill the worker, and nobody remembers him just like they won't remember you. He grinned and took a step toward me, but I drew my pistol and shot him in the forehead. He fell to the ground, bleeding. It was a strange sight to watch myself die. But then the squelching began again, and he reformed into his demonic form. He stood 10 feet tall and was covered in leathery skin that looked like tiny teeth. His face was a nightmare of glowing red eyes and massive sharp teeth. He roared at me in what sounded like 1,000 voices. I turned and ran down the tunnel, ducking so I didn't hit my head and knock myself out. That would have ended my escape and my life. I heard the squelching again and heard my voice call after me. "You can't escape, and besides, I know how to find you." I turned and fired, hitting him, or me, in the chest. He dropped and squelched again. I wanted to watch him turn into his demon form to see him squashed into the tunnel that was too small for him, but I didn't dare squander this time for anything but escape. It seemed like forever until I came to the stairs, and I took them 2 at a time. Once I made the top, I turned to see him at the bottom. I shot him again and then found a lantern inside the church, and I lit it and tossed it down the stairs. The glass shattered, spreading fire all over the bottom. They began to burn almost immediately. I could hear his desperate cries as the flames crawled up the stairs and destroying them one by one. Turning and running out of the doors, I didn't bother with my things in my room. I hopped in my car and drove like a bat out of, well, you know. My hands shook in the steering wheel as I glanced in my rearview mirror, hoping that I wouldn't see that thing chasing me. Instead, I saw a glow growing in the forest behind me. I prayed that the whole church was on fire and that it would spread to all the houses. I only wished his followers were in the houses when they burned. I wondered how many more places there were like this in the world.
Hi, I'm Julia Nimke, and I'm a photographer. I'm going to shoot, edit,
This is my confession. I'm writing it down as a record. If anybody reads it, I'll be long gone. I looked down at the empty collar that used to belong to my best friend, my dog, Jack. "Do you know what happened?" I said, fighting back tears. We couldn't be sure, but there was something in his bloodstream that caused him to deteriorate quickly. "You mean like poison?" "I wouldn't say that, but there seemed to be some toxins in his system. So it could have been poison." "Do you keep all your household cleaners locked away?" "Of course I do," I said. "What are you saying, that I did this to my dog?" "No, it's just sometimes animals get into things that they shouldn't. I didn't poison my dog." I said louder than I should have, causing other of the neighbors' flowers, and then suddenly got sick and died. "Yeah," he said, "you gotta report that." "Okay, and what evidence do I have that he did anything?" "Oh, come on. No, really, Jack could have gotten into anything outside," I said.
Well,
"Maybe
he's
he
a
got
blind
tangled up with a snake and got bit."
kick up a nose,
"I mean, that could be," James said. "But don't you think?" "I'm trying not to right now," I said. "But thanks for you and Steve trying to whip me into a frenzy over it." "Sorry, man, I just don't want old man Johnson to walk all over you. He's done that with so many others. That's why the house was so cheap. A last guy that lived there disappeared mysteriously." "So, what do you want me to do? Go all John Wick and blow the dude away?" "I'm not saying that," James said. "I just don't think he should get away with it." "Okay, I'm done talking now. I'm gonna go watch some TV and then go to bed. Well, if you need anything, I won't be calling you or Steve." I hung up the phone and immediately regretted it. I knew they were just concerned, but I didn't want to think about it right now. I looked over at the empty spot on the couch where Jack would have been lying. I could see him lift his head as if to ask, "What's wrong? Are we going outside? Do you want to play ball?" All within the space of a few seconds while he wagged his tail at warp speed. I turned off the TV and dragged myself to bed. I didn't want to think about today or tomorrow or anything else for that matter. Eventually, I fell asleep. I woke to the sound of knocking. It wasn't forceful, but it was enough to wake me up. I looked over at my alarm clock and it said 10:18 in the morning. I had overslept. Luckily, it was Saturday, and although there were things that I wanted to do, they weren't urgent. I got up and stumbled to the door, and when I opened it, I was surprised to see Mr. Johnson standing there looking unhappy as usual. Good morning, I said with a yawn. Humph, he said. Ma just came over to see when you were going to pay for the flowers that mud of yours ruined. I blinked. He couldn't have just said what I thought I heard him say. Excuse me, I said. Oh, you know all the flowers that mangy mud of yours dug up. You're going to pay me for them. You do realize that he passed away yesterday, I said, trying to stay calm. He said. And you had nothing to do with that, I said in my most sarcastic voice. I absolutely did not, he said. It's something about how he said it made me not believe him. I'll tell you what, I said, feeling my blood start to boil. You buy me a new dog and I'll pay for your stupid flowers. Then your After I was done, I steered back over to my backyard, whistling a happy tune. I got to where I wanted my garden right behind the house and started ripping up grass. I ran back and forth over the patch that I wanted to dig up. At least that was the plan. If somebody would have had a camera recording me, they definitely would have been able to send it in to one of those funny video shows. This was my first time running a rototiller. I started out setting the depth too low, and when I engaged the drive wheels, the tines dug in and took me for a ride. I didn't realize that I'd set it on fast speed. I raced along, running behind the machine, desperately trying to grab the handle to turn the power wheels off. Eventually, I was able to stop and take
I'm not your actual
The
mom.
next time was nearly as
Your
bad.
mom
I set it to low speed, but it didn't want to go anywhere, so I had to push with all my might to get it to
So you
move.
can stay here.
I had no desire to switch it back to high. Just when I was about to give up, it suddenly caught and took off, dragging me along behind it as I desperately reached for the lever to stop it. After about an hour of this, I needed a break. I went inside to get a drink, and when I came back out, my neighbor was leaning on my rototiller looking very unhappy. What do you think you're doing? He said. Just trying to plant a garden. You destroyed my flowers, he said through gritted teeth. I looked over toward his house. Oh my, I said, holding my hand up to my mouth in mock shock. How on earth did that happen? You know how it happened, he growled. I'm calling the police. You know, while you're at it, make sure to tell them how you poisoned my dog, I said, starting on my rototiller. Oh yeah, that mud that was too stupid not to eat the steak that was laying in the flowers. My eyes burned with hatred. It was one thing to suspect someone of something so heinous. It was something else entirely to have them admit it and shove it in your face. I turned away to keep myself from decking him and ending up in jail. But when I did, I bumped the controls, sending the rototiller forward with the blade sticking up the ground. Unfortunately, he was standing right beside it, and his foot got caught in the blades. He screamed in pain as I struggled to stop the machine. He lay there in agony as blood poured from his nearly severed foot. I'll make sure you go to prison for the rest of your life for this. I looked down at him and realized that he would do it. The man who had murdered my dog was going to make sure that I went to jail, and he would probably get away with it. It was his word against mine. My mind was flooded with all the evil that runs rampant in this world. Rage filled me at the thought of such an injustice being allowed to go unpunished. something in my head snapped. I saw Jack happily digging in his flower bed, and then I saw him eating the steak that had been laid out and getting sick. I looked down at this horrible man and knew what I had to do. I engaged the rototiller and drove right over him, the blades tearing into him as I went. He screamed until I got to his face and the blades ripped through it, making him mute when they tore out his tongue. I turned and ran back over him again as he tried to crawl away, but I steered the machine toward him, ripping chunks of flesh and turning the soil a deep red hue. I turned and ran over him again, squishing organs out into the ground and grinding them up. Somehow, though, he was still moving. His hand, or what was left of it, raised up in a stop sign, which I tilled over. Back and forth, I went over and over that section of ground until there was nothing left but dark, moist dirt, and some larger bones that the machine couldn't grind up. I went to the garage and got my shovel and dug a hole right in the middle of my garden, and I buried his bones and shreds of clothes there. I covered them up with dirt and proceeded to plant over top of it. When I was done, I stepped back and looked at my nicely tilled garden that was planted and ready to grow. I turned my tiller back towards the house and nearly ran over Steve. "What the heck did you do?" he said. "What do you mean?" I said, I laid down black plastic once these seedlings popped up through the ground so I wouldn't have to go out and get rid of the weeds again. It was the longest summer that I had ever experienced. Every morning I would look out at my garden and then try my best to forget about it through the rest of the day. Sometimes I was successful, sometimes not. The end of summer harvest party was rapidly approaching. Every year a different house in the block hosted a party where everybody brought something, mostly from their gardens, and we had a feast. This year happened to be my turn. 2 days before the party, Steve came over and helped me harvest my corn. "You know, it's the strangest thing," Steve said. "I've never seen red tassels on corn before." "What do you mean?" I said. "The tassels on top of the corn stalks, they're red instead of yellow," he said. "But only in these two spots." Sweat poured from my forehead that had nothing to do with the weather or the work. "Oh, that's so odd," I said, trying to keep my voice from shaking. We finished picking the corn at the top of her lungs.
He's gonna get cold.
Where to from here? Will your life ever be the same? Are you getting what's fair?
But I couldn't see how she had gotten injured. Next came a scream. It's such a quiet neighborhood. My eyes grew wide as I looked around the room full of smiling people.
Hey everybody, it's me again, Jay, the delivery guy. If you're not familiar with me, or maybe you forgot, I'll tell you a little bit about myself. See, I'm not your ordinary sort of delivery guy. I don't work for Uber Eats, Skip the Dishes, or DoorDash. I deliver food, beer, liquor, cigarettes, and just about anything else you can think of to the citizens of Hollow's End, provided you can pay cash on delivery, and you're not on our list of offenders. And when I say we'll deliver anything, I mean anything. Once I delivered a muffler. Another young customer paid cash to bring their school homework to someone, probably for the purposes of cheating. And those are just the tamest examples I can think of. Don't ask about the albino crocodile. May he rest in pieces. I've been accused of being ethically dubious. Well, one kid who probably played way too much D&D insisted on labeling me as chaotic neutral. In short, I do my best not to break the law, unless I'm tricked into it, and that happens semi-frequently. I try to avoid the black market, but sometimes you just can't help it. It's right there off Main Street. It's a killer shortcut. I used to work for a real low-life scum-sucker named Doc, who had a monopoly in this business, and acted like a complete Scrooge, paying a measly $2 per delivery. But now it's just me and my grandma Muriel running the show. Since that one time Doc tried to kill us and we had to take the son of a bitch out for good. We're the only delivery service in town now, here in Hollow's End. And if you want to get something delivered to your door from us, you have to abide by the rules. Not trying to kill us being first on the list. Rule number 2 is just as obvious, and I've already mentioned it. You need to have cash. Don't expect to pay with debit or credit, because if you do, you're going to be disappointed. We don't even have a machine. Rule number 3 is less obvious, unless you happen to live in Hollow's End, or if you know about the horrifying shit that goes down here. No deliveries to subterraneans. If you're not familiar with those guys, you're better off. But basically they're an underground cult who worship ancient, oversized millipedes. We've had run-ins with them in the past, more than once, and that's why they've been blackballed for life, despite the fact that they're phenomenal tippers. The subterraneans, not the millipedes. Apparently some horrible shit involving them happened to me once as a child, but my grandma refuses to tell me any more about it. And my memory is blocked out entirely like a trauma. My brain is buried. But I do remember when they tried to sacrifice Muriel and I in a ceremony in the forest a couple of years back, after luring us out into the woods with an expensive delivery call. That wretched memory is still very clear and vivid in my mind.
On this world.
Which leads us to rule number 4.
Filled in again.
No deliveries to the forest after dark. That's where the subterraneans live, first of all.
Oh my God.
They have an underground compound which is labyrinthian and extends maze-like beneath the forest for miles in every direction. But it's also where the giant millipedes rise to the surface to feed, particularly after the sun goes down. So most people try to avoid the woods, especially after dark. And if you're too dumb to do that, well, we're not going to bring you any pizza. It's just that simple. The radio crackle of life broke me from my thoughts of company rules and ritual human sacrifice. Come in, Rooster. Come in. This is on coming up with new code names for us and changing the radio channel every single day like CIA spies. Don't ask me why. She thought there were people out to get us or something. I don't like to get on her bad side, so I just played along. This is Rooster, Henhouse. What you got for me? I've got a back-to-back for you, Rooster. You ready? I'll give you the deets. Go ahead, Henhouse. I'm ready. First call is to 274 West Street. You got a pickup waiting for you there that you're going to deliver to 18 Elm Street. Okay, got it. What about after that? You said it's a back-to-back? There was a long pause. Oh, you're breaking up, Rooster. I'll talk to you more when you get over to 18 Elm Street. Over and out. I tried to get her to answer me again, but there was no response. This wasn't sitting well with me. Muriel could be sneaky sometimes when she wanted to get things done, especially if she knew I wasn't going to go along with her plans. This had scheme written all over it, and I had a funny feeling I wasn't going to like this delivery one bit. Regardless, it was a quiet day, and I needed the money. I put the key in the ignition and turned it forward, listening to the satisfying sound of the engine as it began to purr and cough and sputter, then settled into its steady laryngitic rhythm once again. That's a girl, I said, rubbing the dashboard. Just a little while longer, baby. We'll get through this together. One day at a time. It sputtered again, then stalled, as if to say it didn't like me touching it that way. And I apologized before getting it going again and driving off, leaving Randy's rotisserie shop behind. When I arrived at 274 West Street, I was surprised to see there were 2 foot soldiers waiting at the end of the driveway, holding up their hands to stop me. When I say foot soldiers, they were literally a foot tall and appeared to be made of plastic. They had been painstakingly hand-painted by the looks of them, and were holding very realistic-looking rifles. They reminded me of the little green toy soldiers I had played with as a child, except for their size, and the paint jobs which gave them a more realistic appearance. "Oh, who goes there?" the one on the right asked. Jay, the delivery guy?" I answered. "I was told to come here to pick up a package." "Identification, sir?" the one on the left asked, far down below my open window. I poked my head out to look down at him and saw he was holding his hand out, waiting for me to produce my driver's license. "Sure." I pulled out my wallet and showed it to him. "Can I park now? I don't get paid by the hour here, fellas." "Go ahead." the one on my side said, then pulled out a tiny walkie-talkie. Sentry to home base. Gopher is on site for delivery pickup. Really? More code names? And did that little bastard just call me Gopher? I parked the car and got out, walking towards the front door of the house. Before I went up the steps, I did a quick double take at the garden gnomes, which had been arranged around the front lawn. Yep, those were definitely moving. They appeared to be working in tandem to create a new garden gnome, hacking away at a stump of wood with little knives and making a crude replica of themselves. Like a photocopy of a photocopy. It wasn't quite as nice as the original. One of them caught me looking, and I averted my gaze quickly as his bushy brow knit into a scowl. I knocked on the front door of the house, and someone came to answer it a moment later. The woman opened the screen door, smiling and holding a very large box in her hands. "Oh, hello, you must be Jay," she said, readjusting the big box as if it were very heavy. "I'm Blarian." "Hey, nice to meet you. You got some place here. I've never seen anything like it." "Oh, that looks heavy here. Let me help you." I reached out to grab it, and she took a step back, keeping it to herself a moment longer. She bumped backwards into the wall behind her, and poked her head around the giant box to look at me. "You'll have to be very careful with this," she said, raising an eyebrow. "No speeding or taking corners too fast. This is an extremely fragile package." "Not a problem," I said, trying to think of a way to reassure her before settling on. "I delivered cake once." I made a gesture with my hands to show her how large the cake had been, and she gave me an odd look, slotting the giant box into my arms as if I had been adjusting them for that purpose. It was really awkward. But what can I say? I'm a weird dude. "Okay. Can I trust you with this, Jay? It is very important that this delivery arrives
I
at
will see
18 Elm Street.
you in 4
Do not make
years.
any stops along the way.
But I'm getting back from the
I got it.
vacation.
You can trust me, I'm a professional."
Now get out of here.
I lumbered down the steps,